Here's why Syracuse football is 5-1.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, we are going over why Syracuse football is 5-1, and specifically their strengths of the team, because we're at the midway point of the season. We're 5-1 right now with 6 games to go in the regular season. We're going to talk about the short passing game and why it's been so effective. And when Syracuse football tries to run the football, they are actually pretty good at it. Plus, we're going to get into the coaching and the good aspects of the coaching staff so far here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Of all the strengths of Syracuse football, and they have a good number of them because, well, they're 5-1. You got to be good at something to be at 5-1, right? Of all the strengths, I believe that the biggest one for Syracuse, the absolute biggest, is their short passing game. Very specific, I know, but it's their short passing game that makes them so effective on offense. Syracuse as a whole averages 365 passing yards per game, which is second in the country. All right, they are only behind Miami in pass yards per game. Of all the FBS, of all the teams out there, they are number 2 in the nation. But what if I told you that it's not because Kyle McCord throws the ball 70 yards on every single play? What if I told you that, right? Well, it's the truth. Syracuse football, while they can push the ball down the field, they have shown they can, right? We saw that 28-yard touchdown by Umari Hatcher against NC State. We've seen him get behind the defense a number of times to start the year, or at least at the halfway point. But Cuse's bread and butter is not pushing the ball down the field. It is a short to intermediate passing game, and the numbers back it up, because while Syracuse is second in the country in passing yards per game, they are just inside the top 50 in pass yards per attempt. Syracuse averages specifically 7.6 yards per attempt. It's pretty good. Once again, it's top 50 in the nation. But that just goes to show you that this offense is more so short and intermediate than it is pushing the ball down the field on every single play. For context, Miami, who I told you as the number 1 passing offense in the country, they average 10.3 yards per attempt, which is 4th overall. All right. So they have the number 1 passing offense in terms of total yards, and they have the number 4. They're number 4 in the category of yards per attempt. So they really like to push the ball down the field, whereas Syracuse, it's a little bit more dinking and dunking and going more so towards the intermediate route. But I am not complaining about this. In fact, it is Syracuse's biggest strength of the team. I think this is what makes their offense so effective. And there are 2 reasons why the short passing game for Syracuse works really well for them. Number 1, let's start with the quarterback. Kyle McCord is a huge reason why the short passing game works. And you can also factor in the play calling as well. But really what makes Kyle McCord effective is that he gets rid of the ball on time. Very rarely during these first 6 games have I been like, man, Kyle McCord's holding onto the ball too long. He's in the pocket and he's just holding it, right? I've rarely had to say that. Usually it's a couple of seconds in the pocket, and then if nobody's open, he's going to scramble outside and try to find something else. That's how long you got. By the way, that really helps the offensive line because, well, you're getting rid of the ball on time. You're getting rid of it quickly, so you don't have to block for as long. And if nobody is open, Kyle McCord does have some athleticism where he can escape outside of the pocket. Kyle McCord is super duper effective simply by getting rid of the football on time in the short passing game. He's also very smart. This is a very smart guy here. We saw how Syracuse started against UNLV and just absolutely picking apart their zone. That goes to pre-snap reads. All right, pre-snap reads, and that is very, very advanced. All right, very advanced. Now, I'm going to throw out a comparison, but I want to be very clear. I am not putting Kyle McCord on the same stratosphere of these two quarterbacks I am going to mention. But I am mentioning these two quarterbacks because they are the masters of the pre-snap reads, all right? These two guys, Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. These were guys who were not the most athletic, all right? These are not guys who are running 4.5 40s at the combine. They're not Lamar Jackson, who has lightning speed. They're not Josh Allen, who can truck you, who's basically a better version of Cam Newton, right? They're not Patrick Mahomes, who they're not going to razzle-dazzle you and basically play backyard football, right? These guys were excellent at pre-snap reads. What made them great, once again, pre-snap reads, pocket awareness is essential, right? Knowing when to step up, knowing when to roll outside of the pocket, and getting rid of the ball on time. When it comes to Kyle McCord, who is not the most athletic individual, he can run outside the pocket, and we've seen him run a couple of times during this season, had that helicopter run against Stanford, had that big run against Georgia Tech. The three things that make him effective: pre-snap reads, pocket awareness, and getting rid of the ball on time. So Kyle McCord is the number one reason why the short passing game really works well for Syracuse, all right? Number two, it goes to Cuse's personnel, specifically their wide receivers and their main running back, LeQuint Allen. In order for a short passing game to work like it has for Syracuse, you need good route runners and you need guys who can run after the catch. And Syracuse has that personnel on their team, all right? Oronde Gadsden is one of the best tight ends in the country. He was an All-American a couple years ago. Obviously, last year he had that injury, which sucked. But he's back this year, and he's playing at a very high level. He was quiet for a couple of games against Stanford and against Holy Cross. But overall, Oronde Gadsden remains the best weapon on Syracuse. He is also very smart. Him and Kyle McCord were dealing in that UNLV game and recognizing zone coverage. I mean, they were just picking it apart. He's a good route runner. He can run after the catch. We have seen him do that at times this season. Oronde Gadsden, excellent, right? Trebor Pena, one of the big breakout stars for Syracuse football at the midway point. He's among the leaders in the country in catches. He's got 42 this season. He's great at working underneath, and he can also run after the catch. At times, they will stretch the field with Trebor Pena, but it's mostly the short and intermediate passing game with Trebor Pena. Jackson Meeks, another very good route runner. We've seen him a number of times get open on those slant routes. Obviously, he ran a good fade route against UNLV that tied the game. I say good fade route, but that's true. You got to run a good fade route. Got to give Kyle McCord an area to throw the football. He's a good route runner. And then you have LeQuint Allen, who is one of the best receiving backs in the country. The last I checked, which was this morning, LeQuint Allen had the second most catches among all running backs across the nation. So when you put those two factors together and why the short passing game for Syracuse has been so effective and why it's their biggest strength, number one, it's their quarterback, Kyle McCord, all right? Pre-snap reads, pocket awareness, getting rid of the ball on time, which helps the offensive line. And number two, it's Cuse's weapons. They're all guys who are good route runners and can run after the catch, because that's what you need for a short passing game to work. It also helps that you have a guy like Umari Hatcher who can stretch the ball or can stretch the field, forcing the safeties and the linebackers to drop back a little bit more than usual. All right, so the biggest strength of the team for Syracuse is their short passing game. Now, coming up, when Syracuse chooses to run the football, they are actually pretty good at it. Let's talk about it. Hey, Locked On Syracuse fans, it's time to recognize the Roy Player of the Week. And so far this season, we've pooled over $10,000 to support players on Roy. Micro deposits lead to massive change with the Roy app. You can direct your support to the athletes you love, ensuring that all funds go to the specific player you choose. And unlike collectives, you know exactly where your support is going. And you even receive exclusive content like personal videos and updates after the season. And the best part is it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't deliver the content, you get your money back. And this week, I am supporting Kyle McCord. Let's show Kyle McCord some love after another 300-yard performance and 2 touchdowns, no interceptions against NC State. Let's show him the love and keep him connected to Syracuse. Remember, pay today, celebrate tomorrow. Your support sets your team up for success. And plus, don't miss out on Roy's exciting giveaway. Win 2 tickets to a game in November. Just download Roy, create an account, enter referral code Locked On, and you're entered. Already on Roy, any contribution to an athlete's campaign also gets you entered automatically. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Download Roy now and join the NIL game with no subscriptions and no fees. And be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Roy_return on you for more info. Roy, support the players, change the game. When Syracuse football decides to run the football, they are actually pretty good at it. And don't let the numbers fool you. All right. Don't let them fool you, because if you look nationally where Syracuse sits, you would think that this rushing offense is not very good. But just hear me out. We gotta factor in some context. Okay. First of all, Syracuse, in terms of total yards per game on the ground, is bottom 15 in the country. In yards per carry, it's 3.4 yards per carry. That's not very good. The benchmark is typically around 4. That's where you want to be. But just hear me out why it's misleading. Okay. Number one, talked about why the short passing game is a huge strength for Syracuse football. Well, Syracuse football throws the ball more than any team in the country. They throw the ball nearly 47 times per game. All right. That's more than any team in the country. 47 times per game. This is an air raid offense. They are going to throw the football. And I have basically come to accept that this is not going to be the most balanced attack week in and week out. But when you throw the ball so many times, it's going to affect how many rushing yards you have per game. So that's why Syracuse is averaging about 100 per game on the ground, which is bottom 15 in the country. It makes sense. They're throwing the ball more than any other team in the country. They're not running that much. All right, so that's why the total yards is misleading. Number 2, why this is misleading, I'm just going to go out and say it, all right? Yards per carry as a team statistic is just not applicable. You just have to throw it away. It does not matter. I do not care what a team averages yards per carry. And the reason why I don't care about that is because of how stupid college sports does their rushing statistics, okay? It is so dumb. A quarterback gets sacked, it counts as negative rushing yards. Remember when Jack Stonehouse almost had a block punt, right, against UNLV, but he didn't technically punt the ball. He got tackled behind the line. That counted as negative rushing yards. All right. I throw that away. I do not care that Syracuse as a team averages 3.4 yards per carry. And I understand that it applies to every single school, right? Every school has to deal with it. Their quarterback gets sacked. How many yards per carry do they average now, right? I get it. But it's just not applicable. You have to throw out that stat. It makes no sense. So really, what you should look at is what the running backs on the team average per carry. And so let's take a look at what the top 2 running backs on Syracuse, LeQuint, Allen and Yasin Willis, average per carry. And I'm not going to include Will Nixon because Will Nixon, unfortunately, is out for the season, or likely out for the season with a foot injury. Wish him all the best. Let's take a look at LeQuint Allen and Yasin Willis. Well, through 6 games, LeQuint Allen has 94 carries, 449 yards, and 4 rushing touchdowns, 4.8 yards per carry. 4.8 is pretty good, and that is a half yard higher than where he was at last season. LeQuint Allen has been more efficient when he gets the ball this year. I would say that's pretty good, right? He's not getting nearly the same amount of attempts as he had last year, but again, air raid offense, He's still efficient when he gets the ball. In fact, he's more efficient than what he was last season. Again, 4.8 yards per carry. I would say that's pretty good. Yasin Willis, more of a power back, a short yardage back for Syracuse, right? He's still averaging 4.2 yards per carry. I would say that's pretty good. So overall, when you look at Syracuse's top two running backs, they're both averaging over 4 yards per carry, one at 4.2 and one at 4.8. I would consider, while it's not the biggest strength of the team running the football, we know what the biggest strength of the team is. They like to throw it all over the field. I get it. Mostly short passing game, intermediate passing game, but you get what I mean, right? However, when they decide to run the football, they're pretty good at it. They can run the football at least adequate enough, and I would say probably more than adequate. They are good at running the football. They are great at throwing. They are good at running. Agree or disagree with me? Leave a comment in the comment section below. All right. Do you think that running the football is considered a strength of this Syracuse team, or do you think it's more of a weakness? Personally, I think it's good, but because the passing offense is so elite, it kind of gets weighed down by the fact that we're expecting something crazy for the running game, but it's good. LeQuint Allen, 4.8 yards per carry. Yasin Willis, 4.2 yards per carry. And it's not like they're playing nobodies in these first 6 games. I get it. They had that one game against Holy Cross. That's an FCS school, but Ohio, okay. 2 conference games, though. Actually, 3 conference games. They've played 3 conference games. So they're not playing nobodies. And they're running the ball at a relatively successful way. The only game they couldn't was against Stanford. And that's because I still contend they just didn't try enough. So this team, they can run the football at a pretty efficient rate. It's good enough. All right. So the 2 big strengths for Syracuse are on their offense. It's their short passing game. We can loop in the intermediate passing game as well, and running the football. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about the good from this coaching staff so far this season. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And Syracuse football in its last game against NC State closed as a 1.5-point favorite on FanDuel. The line originally was at 4.5 points, but it just kept trending in NC State's favor. People were thinking, well, is there some sort of major injury? No, not really. Nothing was really all that much more different. I get Marcellus Barnes was out, but Marcellus Barnes, as good as he is as a corner for Syracuse, is not worth 3 points against the line. All right. And hey, guess what? Syracuse won by 7. Probably should have shifted the other way, you would think, right? But it doesn't matter. Syracuse found a way to win the game anyway. And hey, if you bet it at 1.5, you just got better odds. So good for you. Now, Syracuse is entering its second bye week of the season before traveling to a ranked Pitt team. Now, I don't have the odds for that game yet, but I imagine that Syracuse is going to be an underdog at Pitt. If you think they can pull off an upset as soon as I have those odds, well, you can bet it on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. Let's now go over the good that we have seen from the coaching staff at the halfway point of the season. Once again, Syracuse football is 5-1 in their second bye week of the year. They got a ranked Pitt team on the road next Thursday. Let's talk about the good of the coaching staff through 6 games. I think the biggest one for me has been their clock management. All right. We have a couple of examples where they showed excellent clock management. It mostly falls on the head coach and Fran Brown, but it also is a credit to the coordinators as well, whoever is calling plays on both sides of the football. Let's talk about the end of the first half against Ohio. In that one, Syracuse football was up 10-9, if you recall, at the end of the first half, but then scored a late touchdown to go up 17-9. A lot of that was because of coaching. The fact that Fran Brown knew to call timeouts while Ohio was driving, credit to the Syracuse defense for forcing a field goal on that drive to make it 10-9. Fran Brown successfully utilized his timeouts to preserve enough clock for the Orange to go down the field and eventually get that touchdown. It was a touchdown at Trebor Pena in that one. It put him up 17-9 at the end of the first half. It sounds so simple, like call timeouts to preserve clock, but clock management is much easier about me talking about it than it actually is in practice. For whatever reason, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard to manage a clock, but I got to praise it because there are so many coaches who just have no idea what they're doing. Fran Brown, in his very first game as a head coach, knew exactly what to do, how to manage the clock at the end of the first half against Ohio. Credit to the play calling of Jeff Nixon, calling the right plays on that drive. If you recall, there was about 10 seconds left in the half. They were at the Ohio 20-yard line, and there were two options. You could kick the field goal at that spot, and that would have been a fine choice. That's fine. Or the second one is, well, if you're going to run a play, you got to run it to the end zone. And, well, they chose option B. They threw a pass into the end zone. It was a low-risk pass, so even if it didn't work out, there was no risk of an interception or a sack fumble or anything like that. And it just wound up working out as a touchdown. But guess what? Worst case, it would have been incomplete, and the Orange just settle for a field goal and hopefully go up 13-9 against Ohio. But the clock management in that Ohio game was superb. And then both halves against UNLV. Sensational clock management by Syracuse and terrible clock management by UNLV. I ripped Barry Odom in that postgame for his clock management. All right. It was awful. Syracuse, if you recall, in the first half was down 21-14, about 6 minutes left in the first half. And they go right down the field in 6 minutes, kick a field goal to go or to only be trailing by 4 at the end of the first half against UNLV. And they leave no time on the clock for UNLV to do anything. Now, you got to credit Syracuse for bleeding the clock down enough so that UNLV has no time, and also taking advantage of the fact that Barry Odom doesn't know how to manage a clock. This is why I am praising Syracuse for clock management, because we saw in the UNLV game, Barry Odom, no clue what he was doing. No clue. It matters. It matters. And then, why it matters so much? Well, Syracuse was down 21-17 at the half against UNLV. And then they scored a touchdown on the first drive of the second half to go up 24-21. So, basically, without UNLV touching the ball or having a chance to do anything with it, because they had like 7 seconds to do something, but that's nothing. 7 seconds is nothing. You had no time, right? So, for all intents and purposes, UNLV did not touch the ball. They were up 21-14, and the next time UNLV got the ball, they were down 24-21. Credit to the Syracuse coaching staff for managing the clock efficiently at the end of the first half against UNLV. And then the second half, again, insane clock management at the end of the fourth quarter there. Syracuse was driving for the game-tying touchdown. They do eventually get it to Jackson Meeks. Got a little bit of some fortunate breaks on the drive, but hey, you'll take it, right? And they only left UNLV 23 seconds in that fourth quarter to do anything. And UNLV had all 3 timeouts, but decided to kneel the ball. Again, excellent job by Syracuse to run the clock down to basically give UNLV no time to do anything. And they were very conservative. They played for overtime. It bit them in the butt. They shouldn't have played for overtime. There was no reason to play for overtime. And again, I am praising the Syracuse coaching staff for the clock management, because UNLV's clock management was so poor, and you can make an argument that that was the number one reason why they lost that game. Imagine if Barry Odom does call his timeouts and UNLV has a minute to go to drive down the field and get a field goal to beat Syracuse. That could have easily happened, but it didn't. And you got to give credit to Syracuse for the fact that take advantage of your opponent making a mistake and making them pay, leaving basically no time on the clock to do anything at the end of the fourth quarter. And obviously Syracuse goes on to win in overtime. A huge game for the Orange in that one, getting its second ranked victory of the season against UNLV. So that I will definitely praise on this coaching staff. The clock management through 6 games, I have been impressed. I've been impressed. Number 2, there's not really this one. There's less analysis, I guess, to it, but it's just something I want to point out here. They're finding ways to win with adversity. Okay, they're finding ways to win. Aside from the Stanford game, which remains a black eye on the schedule for Syracuse, it just remains like, how did they lose that game? Aside from that one, they found ways to win, specifically in the last 2 games. Okay, because they didn't really face too much adversity against Georgia Tech. They controlled that one from start to finish. I get it. It got a little dicey at the end, but it was fine, right? Holy Cross, no one ever thought they were actually going to lose to Holy Cross, okay? There was no chance. UNLV, they could easily have lost, but they found a way to win. And against NC State, while Syracuse was controlling the game against NC State, they could have lost that game. There were a lot of blunders in those games, and that's for tomorrow's podcast when we go over some of the bad of Syracuse's season at the midway point. But today we're going to focus on the good. There were blunders in those games, but you got to credit the coaching staff for keeping this team level-headed. Because it's very easy to get frustrated over a bad call, a missed assignment, this, that, whatever it is. It's very easy to get frustrated, okay? I have seen it. I've seen it with Syracuse. I've seen it on plenty of other teams, college, pro, high school, you name it, where a bad call, one bad play ends a game for an entire team. If you remember last year for Syracuse, they played North Carolina on the road. They were facing Drake May, and let's be honest, they weren't going to win that game, all right? They were not going to beat Drake May on the road, but it didn't help that there was a really bad call in the first quarter, I want to say, when the game was still somewhat in the balance. It was a 4th down play or a 3rd down play, and it looked like, I don't remember the whole logistics of it, but there was a ruling where the ball was short of the line to gain for NC State, but the referees called it as in 1st down for North Carolina, not NC State, for North Carolina. It completely derailed the game for Syracuse, okay? Completely derailed it. It was a bad call, and Dino Babers, it's on the coaching staff for the fact that this team basically quit after that. It was a terrible effort against North Carolina after that play happened. A bad call completely ruined the game for Syracuse, and they ended up getting annihilated. I'm not saying they lost because of it. They were probably going to lose anyway, but you would have hoped that they would be more competitive in that one than they were. Okay? So I've seen it. But this team, this coaching staff, when there's adversity, when there's a bad call, they find ways to win. They found a way against NC State. There were some ticky-tack calls against NC State, okay? I do agree with the referees on the illegal formation on the field goal because it technically was illegal formation. I know the verbiage kind of gets everyone confused because he wasn't lined up directly over the center, but the rule is the body. The rule is basically the shoulders. And if you look, the defensive tackle for Syracuse was right in line with the shoulders of the center. It was ticky-tacky, but it's the letter of the law. It was illegal formation there. And that's something that this coaching staff is going to have to clean up. They can't have that happen again. It led to a touchdown for NC State. Then there was the 72-yard touchdown for NC State that they were gifted. I don't even know what to say about that one when he was forced out of bounds. He wasn't forced out of bounds. Give me a break, okay? If that's forced out of bounds, then every tackle is unnecessary roughness, okay? That was horrible. But credit to the coaching staff. Didn't let it phase Syracuse. They found a way to win anyway. It's easy as fans. It's easy as a radio host or a podcast host to get mad at officials or to get mad at blown assignments or anything like that. But it's on the team to stay level-headed, and that is a credit to this coaching staff. So the 2 things that I've been impressed with this coaching staff so far at the halfway point, the clock management has been really good, and just finding ways to win when there is adversity, aside from the Stanford game. So credit to the coaching staff for that. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. And for your second listen, check out the Locked On ACC podcast because Alex Donald and Kenta Gibbs, they keep it real and bring you the truth on where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference, more specifically, maybe Syracuse. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast, which tomorrow, by the way. Today, we focus mostly on the good, the strengths of the team, the short passing game, running the football, the good stuff from the coaching staff. Tomorrow, yes, Syracuse football is 5-1, but we're going to talk about where they can improve on the team. What has gone, quote unquote, wrong this season, where they can improve because they're not perfect. I love my team, but they are not perfect. All right. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. And everyone, take care.